All right, everybody got the notice that we're recording? Yep. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Pollard. I'm the Executive Director of the AAUP. And today we are going to do a workshop with Dr. Latcha for Parliamentarian 101. For those of you who've sat in meetings across campus, you know how important this is and how necessary it is. It's really important to shared governance. So I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President, Caitlin Dembski, so she can introduce Mike.
Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Mike Latcha, who is an Associate Professor of Engineering and has been at Oakland University for 37 years. He received his degrees from Wayne State University and specializes in mechanical engineering. In the School of Engineering, he's helped found the Multidisciplinary Senior Design Program, which was the first such program in the United States, and he's served as the program's director since 2004. His service to the department, his department, the school, and university is extensive, and he currently acts as parliamentarian for the university senate. He is a longtime AAUP executive committee member, has served on 7 bargaining teams, leading 4 of them as chief negotiator, and is the current president of our chapter. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mike.
I think that was actually quite a bit of a do. Okay, let me see. That was not really where I wanted to start, but okay. Parliamentary procedure. As Caitlin said, my name is Mike Latcha. I'm in the School of Engineering and Computer Science. I'm currently the Senate parliamentarian. And I want to give thanks to Frances Jackson, Professor Emerita in nursing. She has also long been a professional parliamentarian and is currently the president of the Michigan State Association of Parliamentarians. And if there is anything correct in this presentation, it's because of Frances. So what are parliamentary procedures? Why do we need them? Why do they even exist? Well, a parliamentary procedure is a set of rules that's formally established by a group to govern themselves. And the goal is to define the order and process of business in meetings to help a group efficiently agree on what they want to accomplish. And with an established set of rules and guidelines that's fairly complete, the members of a group can reach consensus on any issue in a respectful and collegial manner. That's just a bit of history. There were formal rules to govern deliberative assemblies that date back to the ancient Greeks. The modern rules that are were formed through centuries of trial and error, mainly in the English Parliament, which is where we get the name of parliamentary procedure. These have been important for deliberative assemblies for thousands of years. In fact, one of the first books published in the United States was Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Parliamentary Practice that he wrote for the U.S. Senate when he was the vice president. Henry Robert, who was a U.S. Army officer, lived in San Francisco in the mid to late 19th century. And as he and his wife were volunteering for various organizations around San Francisco, he was struck by the chaos at most of these meetings, mainly due to a lack of a standard set of rules that could be followed. So in 1876, he published his first edition of Robert's Rules of Order that were based heavily on the procedures of the U.S. Congress, adapted to ordinary societies.
With antibiotics.
He published 4 editions until his death in 1923. His family continues his work and published the newly revised Robert's Rules of Order, which is abbreviated RONR, the 7th edition in 1970. These editions since then have been updated about every 10 years. We are currently on edition 12, which came out in 2020. And even though other systems of parliamentary procedures exist, Robert's Rules of Order is the most commonly used modern authority on parliamentary procedures. Okay, and so why are these important for Oakland University? Well, all of the shared governance that happens at the university happens in meetings where faculty and administration are discussing things and acting on ideas. All of the bodies within Oakland University cite Robert's Rules as the set of rules that are going to be used to govern what happens during those meetings. So it really behooves every faculty member and administrator to be familiar with the governing documents of their academic unit and the university, the rights and responsibilities of Assembly's chair and members, the general order of business in a meeting, how and when to debate an issue, how and when to vote, etc. All of the things that Robert's Rules address. The difficulty with Robert's Rules is that the actual book itself is 700 pages long, and it covers everything that has anything to do with setting up an organization, how the organization should run, how meetings should run, and things like that. And it's a bit difficult to get your arms around it. So what we're going to do today is look at a very small subset of it. And I will give you some resources at the end of this presentation so that you can dig deeper into it if you wish. So the idea behind parliamentary procedures this is from the 11th edition, is that the application of these ideas is the best method yet devised to enable assemblies of any size, with due regard for every member's opinion, to arrive at the general will on the maximum number of questions of varying complexity in a minimum amount of time and under all kinds of internal climate, ranging from total harmony to hardened or impassioned division of opinion. And that's the goal of this. So in particular, parliamentary law is constructed with careful consideration of the rights of the majority. And when Robert's Rule speaks of a majority or a minority, he's speaking really to the people, the sides, the opposing sides on a motion. The side that ultimately prevails after a vote is the majority. The other side is the minority. So careful considerations of the rights of a majority, a minority, individual members, absentees, even the people who are not at the meeting, and all of them together. I will make references to an assembly. In fact, I've done it already several times. An assembly refers to a deliberative assembly, which could also be a body, organization, society, etc., that considers and acts on items consistent with Robert's Rules. I'm not speaking just to assembly meetings at Oakland, even though the assembly part of assembly meetings comes, in fact, from this idea of a deliberative assembly. So in OU's governance structure, this can be a department committee, a college or school committee, or an assembly of the college or school, a Senate standing committee, the university senate, the board of trustees also follows Robert's Rules. So can parliamentary rules, this 700 pages of rules, can they be changed to better suit a particular organization? And the answer is absolutely. If the change to Robert's Rules is specifically spelled out in the Constitution or bylaws of the organization, and it does not violate the rules of a parent organization. So for instance, engineering can't come up with a rule in their bylaws that violates the university rules. and it does not violate any national, state, or local law, then an organization can pretty much define and adopt any rule it deems necessary. For example, it's very common for representative bodies or assemblies that meet fairly often to extend Robert's rules to require that substantive motions be debated at 2 or more meetings before voting. And reasons for this include the possibility that members may not be able to attend all of the meetings, the need to consult with constituents after debates, etc. The Constitution of the College of Arts and Sciences, all of the schools and the university Senate, in fact, have this extension, as well as detailed procedures how on rare occasions to move directly from first to second reading. And I will talk more about those procedures and how they fit into Robert's rules and why they're there later in this talk. So the general structure of a meeting. All meetings should have a presiding officer, a chair. The chair's role is to enforce the rules and identify who is to speak at any given time. Generally, we will talk about all of the responsibilities of the chair later. Someone else at the meeting should be designated as a secretary, whose job is to record what is done at the meeting. A quorum is the minimum number of members who must be present to conduct substantive business, that is, vote on motions. The presiding officer calls the meeting to order, and in the absence of an agenda, a standard order of business consists of reading and approving minutes of the previous meeting, reports from committees or officers of the organization, dealing with unfinished business. Unfinished business is never called old business in Robert's rules, because that's an invitation to bring up stuff that had been settled in the past, and to then finally deal with new business. And the meeting ends when it's adjourned. And simple as that, that's the way all meetings run. The business portions of a meeting revolve around what are called motions, or items to be discussed and acted upon. And a motion has kind of a flow to it. And the general flow to a motion is that a member gains the floor by being recognized by name by the chair. The member states the motion clearly. And in order to not confuse the vote, that should state the motion in the affirmative, such as, I move we reject the offer, not I move that we do not accept the offer. It just makes it for a much cleaner discussion and a cleaner vote. With some exceptions, motions must be seconded by another member. So there has to be at least 2 people in the meeting that want to discuss a particular issue before it comes before the assembly. Seconding a motion does not mean you agree with it. All it means is that I think the issue should be discussed now, and it does not obligate a person to vote for the proposal. The chair then either declares the motion to be out of order with an explanation. So motions that could be out of order, for instance, would be a motion that violates the bylaws. That is an example of a motion that would be declared out of order. And if it's not out of order, then they state the motion to the assembly. Yes, they have to restate it to the assembly. The motion is now pending and can be debated. Main motions are debatable and amendable. In the absence of other rules, any member can speak to a motion twice for up to 10 minutes each time. And motions can be made to restrict this time if necessary. Time limits can also be written into the bylaws of the organization, so that, for instance, it could be 3 minutes or 5 minutes. The person who made the motion should be recognized by the chair as having the right to speak first on that motion, if they wish. Other rules of debate are that a member who has not yet spoken has preference over someone speaking for the second time. And the chair has the responsibility to attempt to alternate between members that are in favor or opposed to the motion. If the chair does not know how a particular member feels about the motion, and then the chair can always ask. They can say, for instance, we have heard from 3 people in a row who are in favor of the motion. Is there anyone opposed who would like to speak? But the idea is to make sure that the assembly hears both sides of the argument and is fully informed before taking a vote. Remarks that are made during debate have to be germane to the pending motion. They should not address any other motion or any other item of business. People who are speaking need to debate the merits of the issue, not the personality or the motives of those on the opposing side, or even on their own side. Stick to the merits of the issue. Comments that people make as they speak about the motion are to be addressed to the chair. It should never include names, but rather titles. So you refer to the assistant provost or personal references like the previous speaker. And you see this is where this is where people think that parliamentary procedure is stuffy and formal. If you watch, for instance, the U.S. Congress work, you see this all the time. People will refer to the senior senator from Nebraska instead of by name. But the idea here is to take personalities out of the debate and talk only about the issue itself, not about who's doing what or why you think they're doing things, but stick directly to the issue itself. Once debate has ended, and there's several ways debates can end, the chair restates the motion, that is, puts the question to the assembly and calls for a vote. After voting is complete, the chair then announces the result, and that piece of business is then considered over, disposed. Okay, voting. So let's talk about voting. Voting is fun. There are several methods of voting. The most common is an uncounted voice vote, where the chair asks all of those in favor to say aye, and then pauses, then asks for all those opposed to say no. And the chair makes a decision whether more people said aye or no. We can also have a standing vote where people just simply rise from their seats, those in favor, those opposed, or you can have a show of hands, those in favor, those opposed. None of them have to be counted. The chair can simply make a decision that the motion, the threshold for votes has been reached. You can have counted votes, and we'll talk about this later. If a member believes that the chair has made an incorrect decision, then they can move to have that vote counted. And then it happens. Any member can ask for a secret ballot vote on any issue. Clearly, ballot votes are always counted. One can have roll call or mail votes, which are of course always counted. Another way to vote is by what's called unanimous consent, and this is a procedure that a chair can take in order to expedite the business of the organization. So, typically you'll see this in 2 places during a meeting. Once, in order to approve the minutes, for instance, the chair will announce that the minutes are under review, and given time, if there are amendments to those that are offered, At the end of this, the chair will usually say, if there is no objection, then we will accept the minutes as written. It is the member's responsibility anytime unanimous consent is used. If a member wants a vote on something, then all they have to do is say, I object, and a vote is immediately taken. So it happens a lot during approving minutes, sometimes during approving the reports, accepting the reports of committees or officers, and when the meetings are adjourned, are typical times when you'll see a chair use unanimous consent instead of a formal vote. Again, a quorum is the number of members necessary to be present to conduct business. That should always be defined in the organization's bylaws or constitution. Abstentions, people who choose not to vote, are never asked for, they're never counted, and they're never reported. All members in good standing are entitled and encouraged to vote on every matter, but you cannot compel someone to vote. An abstention says, I don't care, let the assembly decide. And in fact, has the effect of voting with the prevailing side, whichever side wins the vote. All members in good standing have the right to vote on any matter, but should not vote on matters where the member has a direct personal or financial interest that's separate from the other members. However, this also is not enforced. You cannot compel a member to not vote. So even if people have a financial interest separate from other members, they're still allowed to vote. To preserve neutrality, the chair does not participate in debate or vote unless it's to decide an issue or break a tie. So, assuming that the chair is a voting member of the organization, a chair would cast a vote only to break a tie or decide an issue. The chair cannot break a tie in a secret ballot vote, but during a secret ballot vote, the chair can vote. Okay. Counting votes, assuming a quorum is present, a majority of vote is more than 1/2 the votes cast by members present and voting. A tie is the same as lost. So if there are 4 people in a meeting, 2 of them vote for, 2 of them vote against, then that motion fails. A 2/3 vote, which we will talk about as we get deeper into this, a 2/3 vote the 2/3 is a threshold. More than 2/3 of the votes cast by members present and voting is required for that motion to pass. If 2/3 or less, then the motion is lost. A 3/4 vote works exactly the same way. More than 3/4 of the votes cast by members present and voting are required for that motion to carry. So, responsibilities of the chair. So the chair calls the meeting to order. The chair announces the business before the assembly in the order in which it is to be acted upon. The chair recognizes members entitled to the floor. The chair states and puts to a vote all questions regularly moved, announces the results of the votes, protects the assembly from frivolous motions by refusing to recognize them. A frivolous motion, for instance, would be if a motion was moved, debated, and is voted down. A frivolous motion would be a member putting forward the very same motion right after it has been voted down. And assisting in expediting the business of the assembly while protecting the rights of members. If necessary, the chair restrains members when engaged in debate while also protecting the rights of those members, and can be called upon to enforce order and decorum among the members. The chair also decides all questions of order unless submitted to the, those all questions of order submitted to the assembly, may consult a parliamentarian on questions of order, and informs the assembly on points of order. Okay, now because of all of those responsibilities, so the chair is facilitating the meeting. That's really all the chair does. But the chair is the person who decides who speaks, who has the floor and can speak. The chair decides typically all sorts of other things that happens during a meeting. So the chair has, in fact, an extraordinary amount of power to make sure that the rules are being followed. So because of that, the chair does not take an active role in debate on any motion. If the chair feels strongly about a motion and wishes to speak for or against it, then the assembly votes a temporary chair, a chair pro tem, and that chair, that temporary replacement chair, is in effect until the pending motion has been disposed. So a chair cannot, for instance, appoint a replacement chair, speak about a motion, and then immediately go back to being the chair. If a temporary chair is named, that chair is in effect until that motion is in fact voted on. The chair has the right to require all motions, resolutions, amendments, or instructions to committees to be in writing. Typically, this would be enforced if there was historically some issue or motions that are long and involved. Certainly, resolutions are long and involved, and those things are typically not clearly done verbally. So during the course of a meeting, there's other things that always come up that take the assembly's focus off the main or pending motion. If it was just a series of main motions that go on during a meeting, then everything would act very smoothly. However, there's all sorts of other things that can go on as people are making, seconding, debating motions. And this is probably 3/4 of Robert's Rules of Order. So there have to be procedures that guide the assembly in handling all of those other events. And the lists that I'm going to go through here are absolutely not complete. I could not possibly cover all of the other types of motions in the half hour I have left. However, the resources that I'm going to give you at the end are much more comprehensive. And what we will briefly talk about today will cover most situations that arise during regular types of meetings. The lists that I given below are in order of rank. That is, the motion that's listed above one is of higher priority. We'll note as I describe some of these that some of them allow a person to interrupt another person. Not all of these motions require seconds. Many are not debatable. A few require supermajority votes. There's a lot more to get into than what we can cover in this brief introduction. So the first type of motions are called privilege motions, and they are so important that they outrank all other motions, including the main motions. One is to adjourn the meeting. This terminates the meeting. It can be amended for time and place. You cannot interrupt a person in debate unless it's sufficiently urgent. The second is required. It's not debatable. And a majority vote is required. Just under importance there is to ask for a recess, intermission for meals, counting ballots, etc. For a short period of time. Business resumes at the same point it was at when the recess is over. Cannot interrupt the person in debate. A second is required. It's not debatable. Can amend for time and purpose, and a majority vote is required. Question of privilege relates to a matter or the comfort, disturbance, conduct, for instance, of a member or an assembly. So, for instance, if a door is open and there's noise in the hallway, then a question of privilege would be somebody asking to have the door closed, for instance. One of the specific things in Robert's rules that's is that if, for instance, the building or the room that you're in having this meeting catches fire, this is the motion that you use to be able to get out of the room. The last privileged motion is to ask for orders of the day. That is to demand to adhere to the agenda. If the chair has allowed the meeting to get off the agenda or has not asked for permission to take the orders, the items for business in a different order that's on the agenda, then any member can ask could call for the orders of the day. It can interrupt the person if it's urgent. A second is not required for this. It is not debatable or amendable. So the member simply demands that they calls for the order of the day. The presiding officer decides. There's no vote here. And if the assembly decides to overrule if the assembly decides to overrule the chair as he decides, then a 2/3 negative vote is required to overturn that. Subsidiary motions change in some way or affect the disposition of the main motion. So motions can be laid on the table. That is, you put aside the pending motion for some other business. And this only stays in effect until the end of the meeting that you're in. You cannot lay something on the table for the next meeting. Cannot interrupt the person in debate. Second is required. It is not debatable. And it is not amendable. So if someone asks to lay this motion on the table to take care of this other business first, it immediately is put to a vote. There's a member can move to limit debate or to consider to call for what's called the previous question. So the calling for the previous question stops debate right there, and a vote is taken. Now, this is the first one that we've run into that actually restricts the rights of other members, and because of that, this needs to be to go to to stop debate and vote immediately requires a 2/3 vote of the members that are there. The reason, by the way, it's called the previous question is that this is in fact a motion. So someone would say, I call for the previous question. That is the motion that needs to be settled. But what they're really doing is they're saying, I want to return to the pending motion, not the current one. This is something that you see abused a lot. People people will sit in the back of the room, and for instance, and they'll just say, call the question. And typically there are no votes taken at that time. If the chair is not paying attention here, they'll just vote on the pending motion. It does have the effect of, like I said, restricting the rights of other members. So it is not debatable. It is not amendable, and a 2/3 vote is required in order to go back and stop debate and go back and vote. You can move to postpone a motion until later or until the next meeting. Again, a second is required. It is debatable. It can be amended. A majority vote is required. You can take the motion and refer it to a committee. Again, a second is required. It is debatable, amendable, and a majority vote is required. You can move to amend the motion that is currently pending, and that of course makes changes to the text of the motion. There are, in Robert's rules, there is literally 24 ways that they list to amend a motion. Again, this is a second is required. It's debatable only if the motion or the amendment is debatable, and a majority vote is required. Another type of motion that is used infrequently, but when it is, it turns out to be fairly important, is to postpone a motion indefinitely. And what that does is it drops the motion without taking a vote on it. So this is used sometimes to avoid talking about a topic or a motion that would be embarrassing to some of the members or the organization. It's also used to test the strength of the opposition. So if you move to drop a motion indefinitely, then the people who want to speak on that motion and who want to approve it, they would of course vote against it. A second is required. It is debatable. You cannot amend it, and a majority vote is required. So in between subsidiary motions and the incidental motions we're going to talk now comes the main motion in terms of importance. So incidental motions address matters of procedure that just arise out of the normal course of business, and all of them have to be settled at once. And all incidental motions have equal rank. So for instance, if during a meeting, a member thinks that the parliamentary rules have been violated, then they can just simply rise to a point of order. It can interrupt the person in debate. No second is required. It's not debatable, cannot be amended, and the presiding officer decides of whether the parliamentary procedures have been violated or not, and corrects them immediately if they are. If the chair makes a ruling that a member thinks is incorrect, then that could be challenged by appealing the decision of the chair. It has to be made immediately after the decision, and it is settled by a vote. So what this does is it takes the ruling that a chair makes and puts it to the assembly. You can interrupt a person in debate. You need a second. It is debatable. A majority vote is required. As a decision of the chair is appealed, the chair speaks both first and last in the debate around that, and all others in the meeting can speak only once. The assembly can decide to suspend the rules, that is to temporarily waive their rules, any parliamentary or rules in the bylaws for a specific reason. And so this is the rule that is actually invoked when an assembly decides to move directly from first to second reading. And this is why this should be such a big deal. So moving from first to second reading is in fact suspending the rules that say that all motions have to be read at least twice. And what it does is it tramples on the rights of members. So, I mean, consider all of the reasons why a member would have to miss a meeting. If, you know, the member is ill, if the member is traveling, if the member is tied up, in our case, with a bunch of students that need that faculty member's attention. There's all kinds of reasons why they would have to miss a meeting. If there was an issue there that faculty member really wanted to speak to, then if the assembly decides to move from first to second reading, that faculty member has now then lost the chance to weigh in on that motion or to vote on it. So because of that, in the Senate Constitution, in most of the other constitutions, there is a very high bar to actually move from first to second reading. You cannot interrupt the person in debate. You need a second. It is not debatable. You cannot amend it. Robert's rule says a 2/3 vote is required. In the Senate and all of the constitutions across campus, it's a 3/4 vote required. And in some constitutions across campus, like for instance, engineering, in engineering, the quorum is 40% of the faculty who are not on leave. In order to move from first to second reading, one has to have at least 50% of the faculty not currently on leave in the meeting and voting, and there is a 3/4 bar on that vote to actually move from first to second reading. Okay. Anytime you suspend the rules, you are in fact violating the rights of some other member. A member can object to the consideration of a motion. It's used to avoid considering embarrassing, irrelevant, or contentious motions. This has to come before any debate on a motion, because clearly, if you wait until the debate starts, then you are considering the motion. No second is required, and it's not debatable. So someone says, I object to the consideration of this motion, a vote is immediately taken. 2/3 of the assembly has to vote negative in order to kill this, in order to continue to consider the motion. If a motion is put forward that has several independent parts, then the assembly can decide to divide the question into 2 or more motions. Each one of them is acted on individually. Second is required. It's not debatable, and a majority vote is required. A division of the assembly is something completely different than the division of a question. Division of the assembly is when a member, 2 members, one to move, one to second, believe that the vote that was judged by the chair was done incorrectly and wants that vote counted instead of relying on an uncounted vote. There's no second required here. I'm sorry, there's no second required here. It's not debatable and you cannot amend. The presiding officer decides as requested. So someone could call for a division of the assembly after a vote that was not counted. And then the chair would decide whether to count those or not. If the assembly believes that it should be counted and the chair says no, then we can then appeal the decision of the chair. This can be abused to the assembly's annoyance. So it can be ruled out of order by the chair if this happens repeatedly and the business is not being taken care of efficiently. A member can also rise to and ask for that a parliamentary rule be clarified or for more information. It is possible for a person who makes a motion to withdraw that motion before after it is before it is stated or with unanimous consent. So typically, if there are motions that, for instance, appear on an agenda and the person who is to make that motion changes their mind, then they can move to withdraw it as they get to that part of the assembly. Once a motion has been made and seconded, that motion belongs to the assembly and it is to be disposed of by the assembly. That is, it is to be debated, amended if necessary, and voted on. Once it's seconded and it belongs to the assembly, it cannot be withdrawn. There are motions that revisit questions. So a motion that has been tabled later on in that meeting, someone has to move to take it from the table and return it to its pending status. A second is required. It's not debatable, can't amend, and a majority vote is required. You can move to rescind or amend something previously adopted. That's, it's pretty clear. A second is required. It is debatable and amendable. And again, we're revisiting something that the assembly has already done. So a 2/3 vote is required to do that. And someone can, in fact, move to revisit the vote of a previously settled matter during the same meeting. So a motion is made, it's seconded, debated, voted on, and then perhaps later in the meeting, a member would have changed their mind and wished and wanted to reconsider that vote. So there's a whole bunch of rules that are associated with this, as you can imagine. A person that only votes on the prevailing side of the question is allowed to, only that person, those people are allowed to make the motion. So if a motion was approved, someone who voted yes has to make this motion. It can only be applied to votes taken during the same meeting. It is, a second is required. It's debatable only when the motion that's being reconsidered is debatable. Majority vote is required. Okay, this happens very rarely, but it's worth knowing that you in fact can reconsider a vote that's taken at the same meeting. Reconsidering something from a previous meeting would be to rescind or amend something that's previously adopted. Again, this has been just a very, very brief overview of parliamentary procedure. If you're looking for more information, there is an introduction to parliamentary procedure that's on the OU Senate website that I had written years and years ago for an organization outside of Oakland University. I updated that with the hiring of a dean that we had in engineering that had never been introduced to parliamentary procedure. I have in fact updated it to now, it now conforms to this presentation, and all of the motions that we had just gone through are very briefly explained in depth, or very briefly explained in that document. I highly recommend that people get a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief. That's now up to the 3rd edition. I give you the ISB number here. This came out in 2020. This is about a 200-page booklet. The first thing they do in the booklet is to tell you that if you only have 30 minutes, these are the chapters you need to read. If you've got a little bit more time, add these other chapters. It is focused only on what goes on at meetings. It is a very, very good but very concise, easy to read introduction to, or it can be used as a reference book also. It's currently $7.99 at Amazon. For those of you who are a bit more masochistic, Robert's Rules of Order newly revised is at the 12th edition. Again, this is 700 pages of very small text. And it is like $15 at Amazon. It is absolutely it's affordable, and it can give you many hours of careful reading. And for people who are more interested than that, I will give a shout out to the Michigan State Association of Parliamentarians. This is their website. They have all kinds of other resources, and for you if you want to get more in depth. So with that, I see there's something in the chat. Oh, thank you. Are there any questions?
Will you stop sharing, Mike? That's not really.
I can stop sharing. There we go. You're right. That wasn't a question, but.
So if anybody wants to ask a question in the chat or a question, raise your hand and ask a question here. That was great information. I think it'll be really helpful to have that recorded so others can use it. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I have a quick question. My question has to do with, what do you do when you find yourself in the situation where in a larger assembly you're doing committee work, as opposed to focusing on simply dealing with motions to approve, disapprove, table, etc. But you're doing the kind of work and deliberation that should happen within the committees that are presenting the motions?
Well, if a couple of different things you can ask to. So if the order of business in the meeting was to consider and adopt motions, and you are doing the work of that committee, then you can simply ask to conform to the orders of the day. Just, we need to follow the agenda. If that doesn't work, then the motion that all of that is being done on can be simply referred back to the committee that was supposed to do the work. Either one of those.
Can someone in the assembly make that suggestion, or is that something the chair has to do?
No, absolutely no. All of the things all the motions that those are motions that are made by members of the assembly. So if you find yourself doing the work of a committee during, for instance, a committee report, then you just need a motion to refer that matter back to the committee is absolutely in order.
Mike, you have a question in the chat. What happens to a tabled item that nobody picks up by the end of the meeting?
Technically, it's gone. So people do have to. Technically it's gone. If you table it, you can say that it's tabled until you're putting aside this piece of business. And typically what you do is say, let's table this motion until the motion to order lunch is until we get to that point. So it's usually not just thrown on the table and just left there. Typically you will describe when it comes off. If it's still sitting there, depending on the organization, it may become unfinished business in the next meeting, or it may not. So it needs to be clear when it is to come off the table, when it's put there. Again, it is not a motion that's used often or should be used often. If the agenda and the order of business has been thought through and is clear, then there should be no reason to temporarily put something else in its place.
Any other questions? All right, well, I think we can say thank you to Mike. This was awesome. I think this is gonna be great to have this recorded and we can share as need be. I will make sure once I have the YouTube recording all downloaded and everything, I'll get that on YouTube and I'll send out that great slideshow that Mike just did for everyone. I'll send that out to all the members. Just also a quick plug for the faculty satisfaction survey that went out this morning. I'm sorry I sent it out at 7:30 this morning. I meant to hit schedule send and not harass you at 7:30 in the morning, but I hit the wrong button. So sorry, everyone. Do you have any final words of wisdom, Mike?
I do not. No. By all means, this is a topic that a lot of people seem to just avoid. Most people don't aren't all that interested in reading about rules and stuff. It is very important, however, to at least become fairly familiar with these, at least the ones that I went over today, just to make sure that your rights, other members' rights, are being protected in meetings that where you're trying to get things done. So thank you for your attention. Thanks for the opportunity to do this. Yeah, no, that's it from me.
All right, terrific. Thanks, everybody.